Okay, so this is the ISC charter, or a copy of it at least. I had initially started working on a detailed analysis of the charter on the 11th of November. And the reason why I started doing that is because there's been a lot of misrepresentation of what the ISC charter says and what it means and what Moors in the ISC are supposed to be doing. And of course, recently there were other remarks being made that are just completely and utterly false and misleading. But I'll try to address as much of that as possible and bring some clarity to the matter. So without going into any of the details of this, because initially that was supposed to be read by the Moors, but since folks would rather videos, I'll go ahead and make a video. This charter that was instituted on March 19th, 2021, it basically lays out the structure and the basic function of the Interim Special Committee. You guys can read this for yourself. However, the key point of contention right now is the quorum, because Jamal, for one, and of course Jalissa is another, they've been saying that the body, the ISC, needs to have 70 people or 70.5 something in order to have a quorum. However, it's not what the ISC charter says, but we'll get into that. At each meeting of the Interim Special Committee or any other committees, the presence of 63% shall constitute a quorum for the transaction of business. 63% shall constitute a quorum. Where in the charter does it specify 63% of what? Therein lies the point of miscomprehension, the point of misunderstandings. As it's being interpreted by Jamal and Jalissa, because they're the ones talking about this 70 point something, as it's being interpreted by them, the 63% is based solely on the amount of attendees in this meeting that was held on the 19th of March 2021. So they're saying that it has to be 63% of 112 Moors whose names are affixed to this charter, who were Moors making appearances via Zoom and Moors who attended in person, right? That's the claim, 63% of 112. But that's not how the ISC functioned thereafter. And the ISC charter itself never specified, never expressed nor implied that the listed appellations at the bottom of it are the sole members of the ISC. It also does not express or imply that the number of them, the number of those initial members, are what would be the permanent amount that would be used to qualify whether or not we have a quorum. What do I mean? On March 19th, 2021, there was at least 112 Moors that were considered committee members, committee being the ISC, all right, Interim Special Committee, the main body. On that day, there was at least 112. 63% of them would be 70 point whatever. That would be a quorum on that day. The next day, if the number of Moors went up because new Moors came in, then that quorum number would change because 63% of that increased number would be different. Likewise, if the number goes down, if the number of membership drops, if Moors from this list decide they don't want to be a part of this no more and they leave, that number is going to go down. And so too with the quorum, because 63% of a lower number would be a lower than 70 point whatever you came up with. Okay. So because it wasn't expressed nor implied anywhere in the charter that the number of attendees that are listed on it are the sole number that the quorum would be based on for perpetuity throughout the lifetime of the body, and because of the application of the quorum as the membership increased, because it didn't stay at 112, because of that application, we can deduce from that the number needed for quorum fluctuates based on the number of Moors that are participating in the interim special committee. So that 63% will change the number of people needed for a quorum. Now, let's do this, because there are some comments being made. I'll get back to the charter in a second. There are some comments being made about this being my opinion and so on and so forth. In this article that I wrote on December 2nd, 2022, I clearly stated that after a week of researching every relevant document in my archives, what does that mean? That means I was investigating. That means I had evidence. That means this isn't coming from my opinion. It's all facts. So to briefly go over what happened in 2021, because a lot of this quorum business stems from that. To briefly go over that, you guys can start reading from this video section in the article, right? I start explaining briefly what happened. Following the Moorish Constitutional Convention meeting held on June 21st, 2021, the members and officials returned to their various subcommittees to continue the next phase of the yearly schedule. Unfortunately, on July 3rd, 2021, 11 members of the Moorish Militia Committee were abducted at Wakefield, Massachusetts, and held as prisoners of war. That was a bit of an exaggeration on my part, but you get the point. Some for over a year. Among the abductees is ISC Chairman Tarif Bey, who appointed Kendra Bey as co-chair. In the aftermath of the incident, the ISC temporarily descended into chaos as agent provocateurs caused a great deal of confusion. This was soon resolved when the ISC interim chairwoman Kendra Bey and other officials brought order to the chaos, but the damage was significant. A new ISC Telegram group was created for the better moderation purposes, and members of the original group were instructed to join. However, only about 50 members complied, and the vast majority of them remained passive and did not participate any further. Why do I say that? Sometime in early July, after the incident on July 3rd, there was a particular Moor who was allegedly assigned as an admin or moderator of the original Constitutional Convention attendees Telegram group. The original creator of that group was nowhere to be found. I've been told XYZ, but I can't go off of that. I have to go off what I know. This particular Moor, who had administrative privileges, exactly what, we don't know. During the incident, during the chaos, when people were trying to cause a lot of confusion, the committee heads were trying to reach out to this particular Moor in order to grant one of them administrative privileges so they could moderate the group and deal with the incidents. This particular Moor either wasn't able to or did not want to grant administrative privileges to any of the heads, right? So that caused a lot of contention, a lot of unnecessary confusion was allowed to run rampant, and even some committee heads was either fallen for the confusion or willingly participating in it, knowing it's confusion, one of the two. I have my suspicions. But anyway, a new group was created, right, at the direction of the interim chairwoman, because we needed to moderate the crisis that was happening. And I should elaborate, this crisis really took off when it was exposed that one of the Moors who were in the militia, their phones might have been compromised. This was exposed by someone close to that Moor to the whole body, not just to the committee heads. And so because of that, a lot of people went into a panic because they're thinking the FBI is watching them. And then the agent provocateurs took advantage of that, telling people they need to delete their profile pictures, change their names, this, that, and the third, which caused a bunch more confusion. And yes, some committee heads did participate in that, but a new group was created and everybody was instructed to join. At that time that chaos was going on, there was about 133 members in the original group. Out of the 133 members, only about 58. I say about 50 in the article, but it was roughly 58. I've seen a particular document recently, or screenshot rather, that shows 58 joined the new group. Thereafter, most of them just remained passive. They didn't participate in nothing. They didn't show up to the September 21st meeting. They didn't do nothing. Only about 17 were active, right? Now, some point on August 20th, 2021, there was a committee heads meeting that I attended, right? And I'll just read off this important note for you because some people might have some questions as to why the Secretary of the Technology Committee is even a part of this. TC Chairman Mahbub Mike Abdullah L. and TC Co-Chair Brother Isbay are both absent. TC Secretary Hakeem Bahadur Farouk Bey temporarily assumes the role of interim chairman for the specific purpose of speaking on behalf of the TC and taking notes to brief Chairman Mahbub Mike Abdullah A. L. and Co-Chair Brother Isbay. Why am I allowed to do that? Technology Committee, Interim Special Committee. Section 2.3, Committee List of Official Positions, Roles, and Responsibilities. Secretary. Responsible for recording committee meetings, preparing meeting minutes and agenda, as well as temporarily exercising the power of chairman in the unlikely event that both the chairman and co-chair are absent or otherwise unable to fulfill their duties. For the specific purpose of appointing a new chairman or speaking on behalf of the TC until the chairman or co-chair returns. In such rare cases, the secretary is also expected to prepare a memo for the chairman or co-chair. Shortly after this meeting, a few days after rather, there was no other word, was the last time, I should say, that was the last time we heard, the TC heard, from the chairman. A few months after that, or a month or so after that, was the last time the co-chair participated in the ISC, in the committee heads. So since then, I've just been the one, just me, as interim chairman, but still secretary. So that's where that comes from. But on this meeting, August 20th, 2021, there was a lot of things being discussed. A lot of things were revealed that were being said behind the scenes, right? And I had to address it, but we got past that. However, there was another issue that relates to it that I had to address that relates to what I'm talking about now. Starts off saying, Secretary Hakeem Bey further clarifies his own views, clarifies his own views on the involvement of the ISC in the court proceedings stemming from the July 3rd incident by saying 1. The purpose of the ISC, as it's written and voted on, is to establish and host a constitutional convention. 2. The purpose of the convention, as it's construed, is to establish government. 3. That said government, when established, is responsible for handling the extraction of the Moors. Right? And 4. For the ISC to rightfully focus on the matter now without objection, we would need to formally amend its purpose in writing and vote on it, preferably at an emergency MCC meeting. Did that say emergency Grand Committee Heads meeting? It's an emergency MCC meeting, including all the Moors that were supposed to be a part of this, even though a lot of them ran away at this point. So whoever's active, basically. Suggestion. This was a suggestion I made, which was an alternative to the MCC meeting. Create a separate POW emergency committee that is focused solely on organizing the return of the Moors of the ISC who are abducted. Right? So that was my suggestion. Either we have an emergency MCC meeting where we could amend the charter, right, to be able to include that, or rather to be able to allow us to rightfully focus on such a matter that's supposed to be the job of the government, or we create a separate committee that's tasked with focusing on that solely, like nothing else. Chairwoman Kendra Bey later agreed that Secretary Hakeem Bey was right about the purpose of the ISC. Jamal Bey chimes in through Jalissa L, inquiring about the intent of the meeting. Now, mind you, Jamal was already in jail at the time, so he was on a phone call. He called in, he was talking to Jalissa, she was on the phone with him, telling him God knows what, and he decides to chime into the meeting. Right? And according to the charter, by him doing so, where is it at? Right. By him doing so here, he's essentially counted as being present in the meeting because he's via telephone. Charter doesn't specify how long a Moor has to be in the meeting via telephone. So because he was there for at least a few minutes or a minute or so, he's counted as present. So he chimes in and he asks if there were anything decided. Now, mind you, he's probably already aware that this was a committee heads meeting by now, right? This wasn't no MCC meeting. So the fact that he's inquiring about if anything was decided kind of implies that the committee heads have the ability to decide stuff. Anyway, I won't get too deep into that. Chairwoman Kendra notifies him of the discussion about the purpose of the ISC and what Secretary Hakeem Bey clarified. So she essentially told him what we're talking about and what I said regarding the matter. Jamal Bey suggests having the ISC act as the de facto government for the Moors. Then the call cuts off. Now, this is the same Moor that's now telling me that the committee heads don't have the authority to make any decision for the ISC. But this same Moor was suggesting that the ISC act as the de facto government for the Moors. You interpret that how you want. Secretary Hakeem Bey responds, noting, and this was after the call cuts off, Secretary Hakeem Bey responds, noting that even if we were to act as the de facto Moorish government, we'd still need to bring it to a vote within the ISC. So I'm trying to do things the right way. I'm trying to adhere to the charter. I'm not trying to do anything outside of that, right? But I also conceded because, it was an emergency situation. So I entertained that thought for a little bit. And I said, we, the heads, could, and this is a theoretical, we could arbitrarily decide to act as de facto, but that may be in violation of law. This is what I was saying. And this was only a theoretical that was put out because of the suggestion that was made. And you have to remember, at this point in time in August, it was largely the heads that were active. The vast majority of the 112 Moors that signed the document, and the 133 that were part of the original group, they were mostly inactive. It was maybe less than 15 of us by then, by August, which was mostly committee heads, because it was like 13 of us at the time. So anyway, this was my suggestion. And Jalissa comes in insisting that all they need is bodies to show up at the courthouse, But even that I tried to resolve by implementing or drafting a proposal for a committee that would focus on that, which was essentially this suggestion here that was reworked into a committee called Emergency Operations Committee or something like that, EOC. So anyway, that's just to give you a brief of what was being discussed, what was being suggested, and what I had to say about it. So going back to the charter, I've already addressed the quorum business, right? And I should probably go into further detail with this. All right. So let's minimize these. All right. So these are diagrams I made recently in order to give Moors a visual idea of what was going on in 2021, right? On the left is the structure of the ISC around the time of the June 21st MCC meeting and the July 3rd incident. That's what these numbers represent for that time frame. And I put an asterisk there because it's a range of dates. And I'm sure there were some Moors that came in during that MCC meeting, so the number probably went up from what it was before. But on July 3rd and July 4th, there was only 133 members in the original group. On June 21st, however, there were only 80 members present at that meeting. How do I know? I counted them. They were in the chat. I scrolled through all the pages and I counted who was there. So anyway, this is a structure. Chairman, co-chair, secretary. Then you have the committees, which were Technology, Education, Press and Publishing, Moorish Affairs, Internal Review Board, Agriculture, Public Relations, and Militia. On July 3rd, the militia got into their little deal, their little incident, right? That became a big thing. And the alleged, and I say alleged because there was no documents that I could find that shows this Moor was the head of the militia, but the brother who does rap, whoever his name is, was alleged to be the chairman of the militia committee. When the militia got into their deal, that chairman disappeared. To my knowledge, he was not a part of the group that was arrested, but he simply disappeared from the Telegram group. Deleted his profile, deleted his name, deleted his picture, all of that shit. He disappeared from the ISC group. He just vanished. I didn't hear any word about him. I don't know if he communicated with anybody or whatever. So that got dismantled almost immediately. Later on, Brother Devontae stepped up and essentially rebranded the militia committee into tactical training. He became the head of that. On the right here is where it's showing what the committee was like, the ISC, prior to being dormant in November 2021. So by then, we had lost quite a few heads. Now this says inactive, but Sister O'Day from Jurisprudence, if I'm not mistaken, she was like a secretary or something in the press and publishing. So she was essentially the head of both. But the actual chairman of the press and publishing did resign because there was some conflict there. But anyway, the chairwoman resigned. The co-chair who she appointed, he had left when I challenged him in October. Brother Ija was elected, or appointed rather, as the head developer. I'm still active in the technology. Everybody else in technology is inactive. Brother Susanus was there in Moorish Affairs. Somebody was there in agriculture. I forgot who. It's in the article. And Devontae Tactical Training, Sister Najambi as secretary. That was about it for us. In November, it was just 7 out of 13 heads who were active in the ISC. Right? Between these two dates, between July 3rd and November, a lot happened. Right? Most of which you can find, details of which you can find in the committee heads meetings, because that's where it was declared that the Moors who signed their names to this contract and had their names appended to this contract, that they acquiesced their stand-in, right? Because again, contract law, you're not fulfilling your obligations, you're acquiescing. They acquiesced. They were declared dead, right? They were declared inactive, whatever words you want to apply to that. And it was decided by the interim chairwoman to call for a vote among the remaining active Moors to restructure the ISC around the active members, not the passive. Now, most of this you can find in the September 3rd, 2021 committee heads meeting. This matter was also addressed in the September 21st, 2021 MCC meeting. Unfortunately, I don't have a recording of that. If I'm not mistaken, I do have the chat record though. But that matter was addressed, and it was later decided that we were going to go ahead and restructure the ISC around active members, not passive. Because again, just like with the quorum, if the number of members go up, the quorum amount, the amount required for quorum will go up. If the number of members go down, the quorum amount, the amount required for quorum, will go down. And because, where is it? Only about 50 Moors, well, I shouldn't even say Moors because some of them were probably agents. Only about 50 people from the original group transferred to the new group, right? They all had a choice, and roughly 83 of them chose to not go to the new group, acquiesced. This body politic shall be known as and serve the purpose of the Interim Special Committee for the specific purposes of hosting and establishing a free Moorish National Constitutional Convention and taking all necessary steps to meet these ends. One of the necessary steps to meet those ends was to drop the dead weight. It was to restructure the ISC to center around active Moors, not passive. What do I mean by passive? Meaning Moors who not just don't show up to the meetings, they don't participate in anything. They don't even come back online. Some of them joined the group and then they just didn't show up anymore. So if we're going by the number of people in the group, then you're also having to count people who have been inactive for months. People who haven't even been on for months. With no excuse, no communication to the heads. They're not part of any committees. They're just in the group because they want to be a part of something. And that's another thing. There's nothing in the charter that specifies how a Moor can become a committee member. The modus operandi, the way we've been doing things, is essentially whoever shows up to the meeting and whoever joins the committee, the original committee group, the ISC group, they essentially just automatically become committee members. But there was no real explained or expressed process in which members would be added to the body or removed from the body. Because if that's the case, if we were going by the same process of counting the number of people inside the group, then at some point, as the numbers grew, the body would come to a standstill and it wouldn't move any further. It would be dead in the water because you have half the Moors that are not even active on the app, right? You have the other Moors who are actively showing up to the meetings and can't get anything done because they don't have a quorum. Hence the need to reorganize around active members. It was also declared by the interim chairwoman at some point, if I'm not mistaken, September 3rd, 2021, committee heads meeting, that we, the committee heads, are the ISC. We were the active ones getting the work done. Everybody else were passive, not showing up to anything, not voting in any of the polls that were put into the chat, not being members of a committee, not doing anything. We were the active ones. So it was declared that we, the committee heads, are the ISC. And we, the committee heads, as the ISC, we decided to restructure the ISC around active Moors. That's it. Now, if you have any other questions about what happened in the interim special committee and or the committee heads group in 2021, then you should probably ask someone who knows, someone who was there throughout all of it. You should probably investigate, because the one person you're asking was not even a part of all the meetings. And the few meetings she attended, she was not there the whole time. She'd be there in the beginning, start complaining about something wrong with the phone, can't hear nothing, can't hear nobody, and then leave. So I'm not surprised you're missing a whole lot of information. You should probably do your investigation before you start talking.